Greetings, my fellow freedom lovers and sovereign thinkers. This is LL3's newest podcast. My name is Craig, transmitting from the beautiful swampy mangroves of South Florida. And today's date, Saturday, November 21st, 2015. It is amazing that this year is flying through. I'm like, oh my goodness. Yeah, I'm just getting stuff little by little, getting things rearranged. I'm not in a permanent location at this time. However, I am safe. Got to take care of a few mechanical things on my pickup truck, but you know what? It's not disastrous. Just to let you folks know. And getting in tune, going back to work. It's been a while when I came back here. So, it's just one of those days, I would say. So, we'll be talking a few topics about one Congresswoman is supporting a bill to get rid of it's called an anti-CIA war bill on Syria. And of course, refugee settlements again, and the following attacks, and bigger picture, etc. So, trying to keep it like maybe under an hour, maybe a little bit over that, but I'm not going to be dragging. So, it's all good. Just trying to get back into the swing of things again, and I'm digressing. All right, well, the first article caught my eye, which I've been keeping some tabs on this person, is Tulsi Gabbard, which is a Democrat from Hawaii. And this one's from ZeroHedge.com. It's entitled, U.S. Congresswoman Introduced Bill to Stop Illegal War on Assad. Says CIA ops must stop. And it reads here, last month, U.S. Congresswoman Tulsi Gabbard went on CNN and laid bare on Washington's Syria strategy. In a remarkably candid interview with Wolf Blitzer, Gabbard calls Washington's efforts to oust Assad counterproductive and illegal before taking a step further and accusing the CIA of arming the same terrorists who the White House insists are sworn enemies. In short, Gabbard all but tells the American public that the government is lying to them and may end up advertently starting World War III. For those who missed it, here's the clip. And it's like an 8-minute long clip. And it was a good interview, I would be very sincere. And I'm not a big Wolf Blitzer fan or CNN. However, it is very meritable. Now we'll continue on here. Well, in the wake of the attacks, Gabbard has apparently had just about enough of Washington's facilitating in the fight against terror so the U.S. can ensure that ISIS can destabilize Assad, and now with bipartisan support, the brazen Hawaii Democrat has introduced legislation to end the legal war to overthrow Assad. And there's a link on there as well. Gabbard, who fought in Iraq twice, has partnered with Republican Scott on the bill, and the AP link from Yahoo. So she is a veteran, which is good. Yeah, I will have to commend that. In an unusual alliance, a House Democrat and a Republican have teamed up to urge Obama administration to stop trying to overthrow Syrian President Bashar Assad and focus all its efforts on destroying Islamic State militants. Representatives Tulsi Gabbard, a Democrat, and Austin Scott, a Republican, introduced legislation on Friday to end what they call an illegal war to overthrow Assad. The leader of Syria, accused of killing tens of thousands of Syrian citizens in a more than a 5-year-old civil war entangled in a battle against IS extremists, also known as ISIS. The U.S. is waging two wars in Syria, Gabbard said. First is the war against ISIS and the other Islamic extremists, which Congress authorized after the attack on 9/11. The second war is an illegal war to overthrow Syrian government Assad. Scott said, working to move Assad at the stage is counterproductive to what I believe our primary mission should be. Since 2013, the CIA trained an estimate 10,000 fighters, although the number still fighting with so-called moderate forces is unclear. CIA-backed rebels in Syria who had begun to put serious pressure on Assad forces are now under the Russian bombardment, with all little prospects of rescue by their American patrons, U.S. officials say. For years, the CIA effort has foundered so much that over the summer, some Congress proposed cutting its budget Some CIA-supported rebels have been captured. Other hand had defected to extremist groups. Gabar complained that Congress has never authorized the CIA effort, though covert programs do not require congressional approval, and the program has been briefed to the Intelligence Committee as required by law, according to congressional aides who are not authorized to be quoted discussing this matter. Well, you know, I gotta say, up yours, as far as I'm concerned. Now we'll continue on here. Gabar contends the effort to overthrow Assad is counterproductive because it's helping IS topple the Syrian leader and take control of all of Syria. If ISIS were able to seize the Syrian military weaponry, infrastructure, and hardware, the group would become even more dangerous than it is now and exacerbate the refugee crisis. And make no mistake, Tulsi's understanding of Washington's absurd Mideast policy goes far beyond Syria. That is, Gabar fully grasped the big picture as well. Here's what she has to say about the idea the U.S. should everywhere and always attempt to overthrow regimes when human rights groups claim there's evidence of oppression. People have said the very same thing about Saddam Hussein, the very same thing about Muammar Gaddafi. The result of those two failed efforts of regime change and the following nation building have been absolute. Not only have been failures, but they've actually worked to strengthen our enemy. Can't disagree with that there, my friends. Okay, we'll continue. Somebody get Lagny on the phone. This woman must be stopped. I love sarcasm. Here's Gabar speaking to CNN this week about Assad. So there's hope for the U.S. public after all. Because there's a little clip in there as well. So definitely check this out, my friends. Perhaps if the clueless masses won't listen to lunatic fringe blogs on Sergei Lavrov, they'll listen to a U.S. Congresswoman who served 2 tours of duty in Iraq, who is now telling Americans that the White House, the Pentagon, and most especially the CIA are together engaged in an illegal effort to overthrow the government of a sovereign country, and the process are arming the very same extremists that the attacking civilians in places like Paris. Good luck, Tulsi, and thanks for proving that there is at least one person inside that beltway that isn't either dishonest or naive. I have to agree with the writer from Zero Hedge on this article, because the truth of the matter is, my friends, we should not be involved with foreign entanglements. This is just an example why an empire is nothing more than a monumental deception. And I've been pushing that for a good long time, and I'm not the only one, because many of us are doing this, persuading, planting those seeds to everyone within our community. If I hear this, well, I try to tell to people, and they don't want to listen, or they don't want to comprehend. You know what? You go further. You don't hang out with the stagnant ones. Get the focus on the ones that are interested. Don't just shove it down their throats with malice or paranoia, but do it with love. This is how things happen. It takes time. Things are progressing. A spiritual awakening has strengthened. I wish it was overnight myself, but you know what? You're always going to have those doubtful Thomases out there. That's how the world works. So instead of complaining, you start being productive. And this is from Gabbard. Here are 10 reasons the U.S. must end this war to overthrow the Syrian government of Assad. 1. Because if we succeed in overthrowing the Syrian government of Assad, it will be open the door for ISIS, Al-Qaeda, and other Islamic extremists to take over all of Syria. There will be genocide and suffering on a scale beyond our imagination. These Islamic extremists will take over all the weaponry, infrastructure, and military hardware of the Syrian army and be more dangerous than ever before. 2. We should not be allying ourselves with these Islamic extremists by helping them achieve their goal, because it is against the security interests of the United States and all of civilization. Remember, Barack Obama talked about working with Al-Qaeda to overthrow Gaddafi in Libya. Now I see all the Obama supporters going on the tirade. If it was a Republican, they'll be foaming at the mouth like Cujo. All right. 3. Because the money and weapons the CIA is providing to overthrow the Syrian government of Assad are going directly and indirectly into the hands of the Islamic extremist groups, including Al-Qaeda affiliates, al-Nusra, Ahrar al-Sham, and others who are actually enemies of the United States. These groups make up close to 900% of the so-called opposition forces and the most dominant fighters on the ground. 4. Because our efforts to overthrow Assad has increased and will continue to increase the strength of ISIS and other Islamic extremists, thus making them a bigger regional global threat. 5. Because this war has exacerbated the chaos and carnage in Syria, and along with the terror inflicted by ISIS and other Islamic extremist groups fighting to take over Syria, continue to increase the number of Syrian forces to flee their country. 6. Because we should learn from our past mistakes in Iraq and Libya that U.S. wars to overthrow secular dictators Saddam Hussein and Muammar Gaddafi cause even more chaos and human suffering and open the door for Islamic extremists to take over in those countries. 7. Because the U.S. has no credible government or government leader ready to bring order, security, and freedom to the people of Syria. 8. Because even the best case scenario that the U.S. successfully overthrows the Syrian government of Assad would obligate the United States to spend trillions of dollars and the lives of American service members in the futile effort to create a new Syria. This is what we've been trying to do in Iraq for 12 years, and we still have not succeeded. The situation in Syria will be much more difficult than in Iraq. 9. Because our war against the Syrian government of Assad is interfering with our being one-pointedly focused on the war to defeat ISIS, Al-Qaeda, and other Islamic extremists who are our actual enemy. 10. Because our war to overthrow Assad government puts in direct conflict with Russia and increases likelihood of war between the United States and Russia and possibly another world war. And there's another link too, a 40-second clip on the bailouts. But I have to say, I do give Congresswoman Gabbard eternal homage for what she has addressed. She is absolutely correct. When this bill, unfortunately, I wish I had the number and all that, this bill comes out, everyone out there needs a petition to your servants and let them know. If you vote no, then you're part of the problem. The election year is just around the corner, my friends. This is why I find this exciting. There's another person in there is calling them out. That's why I don't focus on the partisan perspective, but principle. And as far as I'm concerned, we should have never got involved with this conflict. And I know last year a lot of us petitioned against it, and these vultures want to manipulate and still say, well, I don't care. We're just a bunch of idiots. You know what? To Barry Soetoro and his cohorts, they're nothing more than globalist demonods, servants to the one world order. And here's another thing, too, to all those folks talking about all the Islamic Muslims, Syrian Muslims. Let me tell you something. There are people out there who live in Syria, Christians, Jews, and Muslims were living in peace for 700 years. Yeah, they had their differences politically and all that, but you know what? They knew how to get along. This is why I get a little bit upset when I hear these left-right paradigm fetishes. It's boring, pathetic, and immaterial, as far as I'm concerned. So the truth of the matter is, we should have never gotten involved in these conflicts. And I'll tell everyone this, if you really support these things, I want you asses on the front line. Let's see how tough you really are. Whether you're a neocon sympathizer, an imperialist parasite, or a tyrannical sympathizer. Regardless of what your political views are. You go on the front line. Let's see how tough you really are. That's why I find these illegal wars unacceptable. And all those clowns that talk smack about Congressman Ron Paul, they laughed at him. We're going to do the same thing to Tulsi Gabbard. Gabbard, you know what? It's going to blow back in your faces because there's a lot of people out there may not agree with past Congressman Paul's views. However, when it comes to the legal wars, they're like, he's absolutely right. So this is why I always tell people, focus on common interest. Toss the differences aside. This is why I think I'm happy about this. And I recommend, again, go out there and support this bill. All right? And as far as I'm concerned, here's what I got to say to Congresswoman Gabbard. Thank you for standing up on what is right. Okay, next one here came from the Voice of Liberty, and it can say it's titled here, Refugee Resettlements, No Good Deeds Go Unpunished. Came out today. It says here, the basis of the argument against forced resettlements of refugees to the United States is the idea of the protection of private property and the people of the United States. If the government can't protect the people and private property from enemies, foreign and domestic, then the government has indeed failed its main responsibility. There's always good intentions, but it is wrong to endanger the lives of all Americans in an attempt to help refugees. When government does more harm than good, it should refund your tax dollars and allow you to control your destiny. It is also neither moral nor compassion for the federal government to take more money from Americans to provide for any refugee, especially when there's over $19 trillion of debt and over $120 trillion in unfunded liabilities hanging over the heads and around the necks of future generations in America. How helpful will it be as a country when we go bankrupt? The FBI has stated multiple times that they cannot screen nor vet the volume of refugees that are seeking asylum, and that they cannot be sure that refugees are not terrorists part of Hijra or jihad by immigration. Radical Islam is using and has said they will use Hijra to oppress free people around the world and infiltrate the West. They are openly using refugee resettlement programs to push the horror of radical Islam on others. It also makes no economic sense. The Center for Immigration Studies has calculated that to bring a refugee to the U.S. costs 12 times more to find somewhere closer to their native country in the Middle East that they could go. It's estimated that providing for a refugee over 5 years in the United States will cost taxpayers over $64,000 compared to $5,300 if that refugee stays closer to their native country. After 9/11, we asked, what could we do differently to help stop radical jihadists from attacking America again? I believe the answer is returning to a foreign policy as advocated by the founders, a foreign policy that returns our resources back home and defends the United States borders, a foreign policy that does not engage in civil wars and conflicts around the globe, a foreign policy that does not arm radical jihadists. We have the opportunity to defend life, liberty, and property of the American people by rejecting the placement of refugees that could be terrorists in our communities. While there are some who may feel by calling to help these refugees, realize that you make your own decision, but you don't have the right to endanger the lives of your neighbor by potentially helping terrorists. If you really want to help refugees, don't do it through government. I recommend you go to a neighboring country near the refugee's home country, and or use your own money and resources to help the refugees there. There is nothing compassionate about using American neighbors' resources via government debt to help refugees. Neither it is endangered your American neighbor's life and property in the process of trying to help others. Yep, so it's another view. Another view. Like I said before, we all know it is in the federal Constitution, but we have to always look at things in the bigger picture. like the whole immigration status, refugee status, has to be across the board. And vetting, it's got to be one of the key topics. Like we said before, stop bombing this country and many others. It's what's really disturbing, my friends. It's not being anti-Syrian or anything like that. Got to look at everything through a bigger picture. That's how I do things the best that I can. And like I said in my last episode, I'm not here. I don't care about little immaterial posts about these things. That's why always observe responsibly. Look at things a lot broader. Be more methodical before jumping to conclusions. With the whole Fox CNN parade, all it is like having your hands crossed and go, all hail to Big Brother. Doesn't matter what paradigm you're in. Stop getting involved in foreign entanglements. Plain and simple. Next one here came from Your Newswire. I know I found out about this yesterday, so I think I can do it right now. It says here, following Paris attack, France moves to strip civil liberties from. This is by Carol Adele. In a move that will severely limit the civil liberties of French citizens, President Francois Hollande has proposed constitutional amendments along 3-month extension on the state of emergency measures. Truth in media reports. After a series of coordinated terrorist attacks left 129 dead in Paris Friday, that's the 13th to be exact, November, Holland immediately declared a state of emergency based on a rarely used 1955 law that allows the state to conduct warrantless searches on private property, impose curfews, restrict public gatherings and movements of peoples, confiscate weapons at will, and take over the press. Can we say tyranny? By the law, state of emergency cannot last more than 12 days, but Holland asked for a 3-month extension Monday. He also proposed a series of constitutional amendments to increase the state's surveillance powers and give it power to strip convicted terrorists and binationals who commit hostile acts towards France of citizenship. Holland said the amendments are necessary so the state doesn't have to resort to the state of emergency to deal with terror threats. We must change our constitution to act against terrorism, he said Monday. The proposed amendments will also give the state more sophisticated methods to crack down on weapons trafficking, a quicker way to deport foreigners considered a threat, and the ability to bar binationals considered a terror risk from entering the country. The French conducted 168 raids Sunday night, turning up cash, bulletproof vests, and various types of guns and a rocket launcher, reported the Wall Street Journal. Police put 104 people on house arrest and detained 23 others. This is very scary to my French brothers and sisters out there. Do you want a broader police state in the crossroad nation? I'll say this in good faith. In my view, hell no. You have to follow natural law. And if you're gonna trust Hollandale and the French Parliament to protect you, this is nothing more than a wet dream. I believe the people of France needs to look at history real thoroughly. Look what happened after the burning of the Reichstag in Germany. Very similar. Okay? Plus, the Patriot Act, which has got abolished, supposedly, but they have the USA Freedom Act. A little more compromising and sweet, right? I'd rather fart on that. As always, a lot more. Kio bono. Who benefits? As far as I'm concerned, the one world order. And based on this, I believe, in my personal view, that Prime Minister Holland is a global agent. It is completely unacceptable. If you want true martial law, you should call out the French citizens and have them where to muster, not leave all your security eggs in the hands of them. The people in France should revolt in these areas. Read your constitution and examine it thoroughly and exercise it completely. Because this is nothing more than a deception. 1984 style totalitarian platform. And I have some of my friends that live there understand that. You gotta carry the ball and let them know this is unacceptable. And start exercising your right to bear arms. Go back to natural law. And I'm glad I'm saying this, because the whole thing is this, my friends. You don't never, ever want to jump on any fear, the game of fear. That's what they want us all to do. Hide, fear, and all that. Now I'm going to give you a couple of quotes. This is one from Thomas Paine. It's not just the United States, but the world, but including France. Here's what he had to say. He that would make his own liberty secure must guard even his enemy from oppression. For if he violates this duty, he establishes a precedent that will reach to himself. And we'll go one more. You guys can look this up, so don't be shy. And this is one here. It's from Samuel Adams. I'm looking it up. I'm just taking my time. Sorry about that, my friends. Should have had this done immediately, but this time, hey, it's just me. I like to improvise, adapt, and conquer. And it says here by Samuel Adams, the natural liberty of man is to be free from any superior power on earth, and not to be under the will or legislative authority of man, but only to have the law of nature for his rule. Hopefully the people out in Europe and the world, including the United States, can comprehend that. And I'm not here to say it out of fear, but out of love and homage. That's just I always believe in that. 47, still learning and teaching. To my brothers and sisters in France, fight for what's right. Don't let this tyrannical agenda affect your neighbors, your loved ones, your families, your friends, acquaintances, comrades, and enemies. Viva la liberty to France. Never give that up. All right, next one here came from News with Views. Came out a couple of days ago by Charles Baldwin. And it's a good one. It says here, this Paris attacks more than meets the eye. It says here, Paris, France, Muslim terrorists took the lives of over 120 people. Here are my observations. I am aghast and flummoxed at the number of Americans who just cannot seem to comprehend the culpability that the U.S. government has in all of this. This only makes sense when one takes into account that the vast majority of Americans only know what the mainstream media tells them. And without question, our mainstream media is nothing more than a propaganda ministry for Washington, D.C. Without a doubt, the controlled major media in America, rivals of the controlled major media of Hitler's Germany or Stalin's Soviet Union. Make no mistake about it. The wars in the Middle East are Washington's wars. The refugee crisis is a direct result of Washington's wars. G.W. Bush's invasion of Iraq and Afghanistan, and the continued violent attack by the Obama administration throughout the Middle East, not to mention direct intervention of and supervision by the CIA, British intelligence, the Israeli Mossad, and the governments of Turkey and Saudi Arabia created ISIS. Furthermore, these government entities have all helped to arm sustain, equip, supply, and medically care for ISIS terrorists. One needs to understand that violent Muslims have been killing other Muslims for centuries. In fact, the mass majority of the people killed by violent Muslims are other Muslims, not Christians and Jews. What happened in Paris happens routinely in Syria. ISIS is composed of mostly radicalized Saudi Arabian Sunni Muslims. The goal is to dispose of President Assad's government in Syria as a stepping stone to conquer both Syria and Iran, thus turning those Shia Muslim nations into Sunni Muslim nations. The results of which means Saudi King Salman will become the de facto king of the entire Middle East. It would also mean that King Salman, already the richest man in the world, would single-handedly control the oil of the entire Middle East. And as everyone should already know, King Salman is in the harlot's bed with virtually the entire Western banking and petroleum worlds. In addition, please understand that Washington's wars have created hundreds of thousands of grieving Muslim mothers who have watched Bush and Obama's bombers and drones take the lives of their sons and daughters, and they are mad. The families of these deceased grandfathers, grandmothers, fathers, mothers, sons, daughters, brothers, sisters, uncles, aunts, and cousins have made ISIS recruitment easy. These people know that the Western Alliance is behind these deaths, and they just want justice. Tell me, we would react differently if the deaths were members of our families. Neocons and globalists in Washington, D.C. are using Shia Muslim people as its proverbial straw man to topple the governments in Iran and Syria, because those Shia Muslim nations care absolutely nothing about getting in bed with the international traders who want to further enrich themselves from the profits that can be made in those countries. The only one who is seriously making war against ISIS is Russia's Vladimir Putin, and his efforts against the Sunni terrorists just begun just a week ago. The refugee crisis is a tool of globalists to destabilize the West and help usher in a global police state. Again, the goal is a global economic system. The Federal Reserve has taken the U.S. and European economies to the brink of collapse. The only thing that globalists can do to circumvent this inevitable collapse is create a global panic, global war, and a global police state. A Europe and America invaded with angry Muslims is just the antidote. Please understand that the vast majority of refugees are not terrorists. They are persecuted Muslims and Christians and others who are literally fleeing for their lives. But there is no question that the CIA-backed Sunni terrorists have infiltrated these refugees. Just a moment here. Boom. Ask yourself, why would refugees seeking safety and protection in other countries, they know this will completely alienate the country against them and only serve to further endanger the lives of their families. The attacks in Paris were not committed by refugees. They were committed by CIA-backed, Saudi-backed, Mossad-backed, Turkey-backed, MI6-backed ISIS terrorists. Also known as the same umbrella, I would say, the New World Order. They're in the same umbrella, my friends. Even though the majority of refugees are doubtless harmless people who did not want to leave their homes and did so only for very survival, and with the knowledge and Western operatives have created a radical Muslim Frankenstein, and given the fact that our federal government is making no attempt to vet these refugees, it is foolish for states to accept them. Governors are right to refuse. If the U.S. government was truly behaving in the interest of peace and was not active participant in creating war and stability in the Middle East, and thus creating a refugee crisis to begin with, it would be a different story. In addition, how did those terrorists successfully pull off these coordinated attacks? How did they get fully automatic weapons and bombs into Paris? These sand people are not that sophisticated. They do not have those kinds of connections. Do you think you could successfully get a group of people together and smuggle dozens of automatic weapons and explosives into a European country, and then successfully coordinate a large-scale attack in a high-security major city, downtown city? The only people capable of such a thing are special ops military personnel. In other words, ISIS had help. Folks, a lot of help. Furthermore, I believe the mainstream media and Washington politicians are setting America up for another 9/11 type attack. Following the Paris attacks, CIA Director John Brennan wasted no time saying that ISIS were preparing more attacks against the West. He also criticized America's privacy protection, meaning the Fourth Amendment are similar impediments to government encroachment on our liberties. And there's a report on there too about CIA chief criticizes recent surveillance rollbacks in the wake of Paris attacks. And I did talk about that on my past episode too, about lack of government surveillance, so you can look at that as well. It's in my archive, so on Spreaker. Really, Mr. Brennan? If you are truly concerned about the future terrorist attacks in the United States, why are you not using the power of your agency to help secure America's borders? After 9/11, the U.S. government did nothing to secure our borders, and to this day, our borders are open Saif. And you, Mr. Brennan, helped to create thousands of additional terrorists. You helped arm them, supply them, and sent special ops to help train them. And all you can say to the American people is that we must surrender whatever protections against governmental encroachment we have left. Don't take us for fools. And when this next terrorist attack against the U.S. occurs, Washington politicians and their toadies in the mainstream media, along with thousands of Christian leaders, will blame Islam. They won't give a second thought who the real war makers are. A well-traveled friend from Germany wrote this in a private email. This propagation that Muslims in general are thriving to take over the world is mostly radical Christian propaganda and paranoia with the clear intent to pursue their own political agenda and capitalize on fears in the general public. For instance, if you travel through Iran today, the general public is very pro-West. The majority of Iranian people seems to regard their religious leaders with great skepticism. Also, just look at the numbers. There are worldwide about 50% or more Christians than Muslims. Militarily, Christian countries outnumber Muslim countries in weapons and forces easily by 20-1. And this is not even assessing the quality of the weapons. The United States alone has more fighter jets than all Muslim countries put together by a wide margin. And most of the Muslim countries are allies of the Christian West. The uprising of ISIS is a direct result of Bush's and Obama's war on terror. Terrorism is always a type of guerrilla warfare. It cannot take over Western countries for lack of organizational structure. It rises in an area of power vacuum as a structured opposition is lacking. The goal of terrorism is to initiate fear, to taunt powers, and destabilize existing political structures. If they succeed if radical groups spread the fear of the Muslim religion. Then this destabilizes the political structure in the Western countries with radical parties rising. Since ISIS, the neo-Nazis have gained popularity in Germany. The attempt of Muslim terrorism is not to take over the U.S. or Germany. It is to create fear and political opposition in these countries that weakens their resolve to interfere on the ground countries like Syria, Afghanistan, and Iraq. Also, when thinking of Islam as a religion with world conquering ambitions, there have been major Christian communities all over the Arab world since Islam was founded. Lebanon is mostly Christian. Parts of Turkey, Iraq, and Syria are Christian settled and have been for 1,000 years or more. Muslims had centuries to get rid of them, but they haven't. Some of the Christian communities are enclaves. totally surrounded by Muslim groups. They have peacefully coexisted for hundreds of years. That speaks for more religious tolerance than the reverse. I bet the vast majority of readers have never heard nor read about the fact that Christians and Muslims are fighting side by side against ISIS in Syria. Have you? You haven't read that no one in the West or in Israel is helping the Syrian Christian army in Syria? Have you? You haven't heard that Iran is helping to provide medical assistance and support to the Christians fighting ISIS in Syria? Have you? You haven't heard that Assad's army in Syria is assisting the Christians in their fighting against ISIS? Have you? No, you haven't. The U.S. media and Washington politicians don't want to tell you about that. I might undermine the anti-Muslim, anti-Iran, anti-Syria propaganda they have been dishing out 24/7 for the last 14 years. He gives a couple of reports on here too. Christians, Muslims, Assad troops fight as one to defend biblical town of ISIS. It is exclusive. Christian armies fighting ISIS. Plead for U.S. support. We're done. We're done. There's a couple of reports that you check out. Now, note that even though Breitbart should be credited for publishing the above reports, they continue to regurgitate the anti-Assad, anti-Iran propaganda. However, this bias doesn't change the truth of the efforts of Christians and Muslims fighting together in Syria against ISIS that Breitbart admirably reports. You don't even hear about this on Fox News, did you? There is the first thing the president of France did following the terrorist attacks in Paris to close the French borders. Duh! I think the fox is already in the henhouse. Folks, let's get real. If it wasn't for Donald Trump, there would not be even a natural discussion about America's legal immigration problem. However, the one disturbing element to Trump's rhetoric regarding immigration, his statements that, as president, he was seriously considering closing mosques. Again, Islam is not the problem. We have had mosques in the United States since at least 1929. There are nearly 3,200 mosques currently in the United States, and none of them has been identified as producing terrorist attacks in America. The terrorists that did participate in the 9/11 were not even from the United States. They were from Saudi Arabia. If we're going to attack a Muslim nation in retaliation for 9/11, why didn't we attack Saudi Arabia? Come on, folks. Are things not starting to add up? Either we have freedom of religion for all, or we have it for none. The problem with the rise of Islam in America can only be laid at the doorsteps of the Christian church, and our pastors and churches were doing the job they should be doing of making Christianity relevant to life today, including our political life. The American people will not be losing interest in Christianity and the spiritual void and that other religions, including Islam, are filling would not even exist. That problem is not an immigration problem or a political problem at all. That problem is a spiritual problem. And only our pastors and churches can solve that problem. But they refuse to do it. Plus, the American churches are more glorified social clubs than they are anything else. Far, far too many of America's pastors are more concerned about being politically correct CEOs or Joel Osteen wannabes than they are about being watchmen and shepherds. It has been a long, long time since the majority of American churches were a pillar and the ground of the truth. 1 Timothy chapter 3, verse 15. The rise of false religions is merely God's judgment on the church for abandoning truth. So that quote, the pillar and the ground of truth, that's 1 Timothy 3 through 15. Chapter 3, verse 15. Excuse me there. When the truth is abandoned, does it really matter which version of error takes its place? Christians need to look themselves in the mirror and stop blaming countries ill on Muslims. If a president can close mosques, he can close synagogues and churches. talking about opening Pandora's box. But there is another element to the Paris attacks. Remember that France and most of Europe is a giant gun-free zone. Think about it. A handful of armed terrorists sent tens of thousands of French males into panic like kitty cats in a thunderstorm. European governments, except Switzerland, have successfully stolen the manhood from the male citizens of that continent. The natural instinct of men is to fight for their families, their friends, and their communities. But for more than half a century, socialist governments have indoctrinated men to believe that they must depend on government to protect their families, friends, and communities. Men are not allowed to defend themselves. They are stripped not only of the means of self-defense, but of the mindset of self-defense. They are like 1,000 beasts, running away from half dozen lions. And that's exactly what globalists want to see happen in the United States, and in many respects has already happened in the United States. For all intents and purposes, many states and cities in America are gun-free zones. Men and women are not allowed to defend themselves. The media constantly bombards the minds of the American people with the philosophy that we must depend on government to defend us. Government personnel are always called first responders. They are not first responders. Private American citizens at the scene are the first responders. By the time government employees show up, most of the damage is already done. Had the American government not stripped had the French government not stripped the French people of their ability to defend themselves, and had the males of Paris not lost the mental awareness and mental toughness necessary to defend themselves, the loss of life in Paris would have been much less. About that same time that disarmed Paris was being turned into a bloodbath, the Greensboro, North Carolina Police Department was teaming up with Destiny Christian Church to ask residents to sign a pledge of nonviolence and to turn in their guns. Once again, we find American police agencies and state churches via their 501c3 nonprofit organization status team up to try to disarm the American citizenry. No doubt the pastor of the so-called church quoted Romans 13 to justify this Hitlerian conduct. There's a report on that too. There's a link for it, so you can check it out yourselves. So here would be my response if the police agency requested that I ask my fellowship to participate in such an activity. Haha. First, Mr. Police Chief, will your department take a pledge of nonviolence and turn in its guns? Every day, policemen throughout America commit acts of violence, including the use of firearms. Let's assume for a minute that violence was justified in every single instance in which it's not. Why is it right and proper for a policeman to violently use a firearm in self-defense and not a citizen? Does the natural law of self-defense apply equally to every human being, regardless of profession? Are policemen a privileged class? Second, Mr. Police Chief, do you really accept the criminal class in our community to sign a pledge of nonviolence and turn in their guns? It is proven beyond all reasonable doubt by reasonable people that disarmed society also encourages violence. Asking nonviolent people to disarm doesn't discourage violence. It invites it. These pledges of nonviolence and appeals for citizen disarmament are not intended to reduce crime. They are intended to make the populace more dependent on government. It's not about crime. It's about control. Mr. Police Chief, I respectfully decline your invitation. In fact, I think I will encourage the attendance of my fellowship this Sunday to go out and purchase a firearm. Oh, and I don't advise that your police department disarm either. The Paris attacks, the refugee crisis, ISIS, a world on the verge of global war. It's all a manipulated contrivance of the global elitists to accelerate freedom and usher in Huxley's Brave New World, aka George H.W. Bush's New World Order. Folks, get your eyes off the wizard and start looking for the men behind the curtain, because that's the real enemy. P.S. I invite readers to order James Geiger's brand new film, Midnight Ride, when rogue politicians call for martial law. Distinguished patriot luminaries such as Pat Buchanan, Larry Pratt, Ron Paul, G. Edward Griffin, Sheriff Mack, Stuart Rhodes, Edwin Vieira Jr., and several others are featured in this film. I am honored to also be featured. I invite readers to go to my website and order the DVD, this brand new film. And please tell your friends, order Midnight Ride here. There's a link for that as well. What can I say? It's self-explanatory. Unless Charles Baldwin is a Christian pastor. So people may get offended by it, but you know what? I don't care. It has nothing to do with his creed, but his rhetoric, which is meritable. Folks, you have to always look at things into a bigger picture. I'll tell you one thing. If they would have did that in my neighborhood, I'll be laughing at them. I'll probably use the pastor's leg as a fire hydrant. I would. And to the police chief, doesn't matter. I don't care. You're not going to tell me to song myself. You're not obligated to protect me. And I'm not condemning the police themselves, but they're the thing in the United States. Many of the states have this thing called sovereign immunity and tort liability. Like the legal, technically saying, the police aren't obligated to protect an individual. Something to really look at, my friends. You have to observe responsibly. And I'm just happy to read these things and present it to you folks. And I'm always getting admired by it, still learning every day. So, whole thing is this, mates. You are in the first line of defense. Don't believe the propaganda hype. Look a lot further than they try to tell you. Stop being a lobbyist supporter. You go, like Salty the Sea Lions. Do your homework. You got technology in your hands. The internet right now is great. People talk about the negative side, but you don't let it control it. You control it yourselves. There's days I don't even use it, but here I have an obligation. Voluntary, inspired, never hired. So, like I always tell people, the only way to fight the real war on terror is to protect our Bill of Rights, protect and defend our Bill of Rights culture. All right, next one here, pretty morose story. Came out. It was updated yesterday. I've been keeping tabs. It's about Corey Jones. I know it's been all over Twitter and all that, and I finally took the initiative on checking it out. Real damn shame what happened to this young man. It's entitled "Officer Fired After Fatally Shooting Man Waiting by His SUV." Dan Fisher, Frito Facero, Associated Press. It's by SVN, it's Channel 7 News. I'm not a big fan of theirs, but I like to examine the articles. It says here, South Florida City has fired a police officer who shot and killed an armed man who was waiting for a tow truck next to his disabled SUV last month, officials said Thursday. Palm Beach Gardens spokeswoman Candace Temple said in a news release that the police department terminated the employment of Officer Noman Raja on Wednesday. An independent criminal investigation is ongoing. Temple said the officer was hired in April. The city said he was still on probation at the time of the shooting. The city of Palm Beach Gardens has cautiously and methodically considered the employment status of Officer Noman Raja. Temple said Raja was on duty but not in uniform and driving an unmarked van when he approached Corey Jones the early morning hours of October 18th. Authorities said Jones, a musician who performed with local bands, had just left the gig when his vehicle broke down. A fellow band member tried unsuccessfully to jumpstart the SUV, then left Jones to await a tow truck along a dark ramp on on Interstate 95 in Palm Beach Gardens, an affluent city north of West Palm Beach. At the time, Palm Beach Gardens Police Chief Stephen Stepp said Raja has been investigating local burglaries, stopped to check out what he thought was an abandoned vehicle, and was suddenly confronted by an armed subject. Raja fired 6 shots at Jones, hitting him 3 times, officials said. Police later recovered a .380 caliber handgun, which Jones had bought a week earlier. Palm Beach Police Benevolent Association President John Kazajan said he's disappointed that the city officials fired Raja before getting all the facts. The union president said officials wouldn't have been able to fire a veteran officer without a complete investigation. But with Raja only 6 months on the job for about 6 months, his superiors only had to say that he failed to make probation. The chief probably had some outside pressure to fire Officer Raja, Kazan said. Kazan said the PBA will continue representing Raja. We're looking at all possible avenues into getting Officer Raja his job back, Kazan said. Jones' family and civil rights activists have been demanding answers from police. Attorneys representing the family released a statement on their behalf Thursday saying they were pleased with Raja's firing but also want him to be held criminally liable for the shooting. Our family remains hopeful that the outside agencies brought in to investigate Corey's killings will soon begin to yield factual information about why this officer acted so callously, the family statement said. Jones's family and lawyers have insisted he would not have his gun out on Raja approach he had known Raja was an officer. Real shame, yeah? In the days after the shootings, Police County State Attorney David Ehrenberg made no comment as to Raja identified himself as an officer or showed a badge, the two things the family's attorneys said it didn't happen. Raja van had no dashboard camera, and the department's officers do not wear body cameras. For Jones' family, including Benjamin Crump, who has represented the family of Trayvon Martin and others slain African Americans, the attorney said Jones had 5 wounds, some of them exit wounds, and one shot broke his arm, although another entered through his side and lodged into his upper body, the lawyers say. Yeah, this is real disturbing. I'll find these regardless. Okay, yeah, so Corey Jones had his gun on him. You'll be surprised what things can happen from abandoned vehicles. But we don't know. I don't know the whole entire story, but I know there was a big protest rallies. People had their vehicle, stand in the line in North Palm Beach with their hoods up. They're playing music. You got some folks out there have All Lives Matter shirts, which is good because he is, like I said, with Corey Jones. I don't know him, but I know he's a great. People talk about he's a great musician. So people are celebrating in certain areas, but we have to see everything a lot further. So I hope and pray that Corey Jones will get justice in good faith. And hopefully everything has merit to this case. And it is understandable, okay, with Raja. He should have identified himself. I don't know. But that would have been nice. Go, hi, I'm a police officer. I'll show you my badge. Probably would have been a lot better. May his soul be forever free. And like everyone, we got to start communicating with one another. Yes, you got to be vigilant towards police too, with finesse, not anger. I'm not saying Mr. Jones did this. But it's always this us against them mentality. But the truth of the matter is, we have to really just honor one another. So we just gotta see what this case, see what happens with this case further down the road. And that's all I gotta say about this. Next one here, it's a little brief. Came from Report 24. And it's entitled, Bangladesh Hangs Opposition Leaders for War Crimes. Minister. 2 senior Bangladeshi opposition leaders were executed early Sunday for war crimes committed during the 1971 independence war of Pakistan. As a last-ditch plea for clemency were rejected, a minister said. Both of them have been hanged. Execution took place at 4:45 a.m. or 1845 GMT Saturday. Justice Minister Anisul Hoque told AFP after Ali Ashton's Mohammed Majidad and Shalaluddin Chowdhury lost their final bid to escape the gallows. Well, when you're with the opposition group and you may use oppression, that'd be called treason. So that's why you gotta pick your battles. Choose your battles wisely, my friends. Do what's right. I have to start reading that 1971 Independence War of Pakistan to get more input. But that's how it goes. Like I always say, choose your battles wisely, my friends. And that is really it. I'd like to thank everyone for listening to this episode. Plus, feel free to download and share this throughout your social media networks. If you have any questions, comments, compliments, criticisms, love letters, hate letters, or send me something that is interesting, would be great. However, please use your correspondences with decorum. You can hit me on Facebook, Twitter, Google+, Spreaker, iHeartRadio, or World Truth. You just type in Local Elected Third on those areas and you'll find me. Or you can email me at lookyluk3@gmail.com. And I know I haven't really checked it recently, so I gotta take the initiative on doing it. Forgive me. Once again, thank you for your time. Plus always remember that the demoniac resistance is healthy for the soul and can liberate humanity. Until next time, take care of yourselves, keep on spreading the love, and may your guardian spirits be with you.